Hello friends, as mentioned, training 101. We need to talk about it. There's a lot of misconceptions revolved around what you should do with your training. Should you adjust your training? How should your training look when you enter a contest prep? Should it change at all? And actually the answer is very easy. There's a lot of myths, we'll have to bust them. But other than that, training is training. But we'll dig into that. But first, I need a coffee as usual. And I need to restock the fridge full of some prep staples so I can give you an eye into that and how that's working as well. Let's go. So now we've got a coffee, I can get some steps in, not in the baking heat, which is good. Let's touch on the first point, and I think the point that most people will know, but maybe the very first time competitors still won't understand. You don't need to change your training from off-season to contest prep. Low reps to build muscle, high reps to cut, it's not a thing. The best thing you can think of is what builds muscle in a calorie surplus, keeps muscle in a deficit. So if you had a really good off-season plan, it kept you strong, provided loads of mechanical tension, you should just stick with that template, maybe just change some exercise around it if you want to, going into prep. For me this season, I've not changed my program at all. I ran up sumo deadlifts, hack squat, overhead pressing, and T-bar row in a really big way this off season. And I'm just keeping them in and hoping to God I can keep those weights for as long as possible. All right, so back from the coffee run and got the stuff for prep, I figured I could just take you through all that stuff right now. So this is an elite hack on prep. Seaweed snacks. They're like, I want to say they're like 50 to 100 calories for the pack, like salty, kind of like crisps, chips, and just hit like a nice salty spot if you ever need it. Of course, eggs, classic. Heaps of like frozen fruit and vegetables, so I just get like loads of blueberries, different like vegetable mixes because that's easier. Some more proteins, yogurt, tuna, and then of course, we're not going into prep without Diet Coke, let's face it. All right, let's talk back about training. So back on the anabolic sofa. Speaking of retaining muscle, that is actually your number one priority on prep. I know that sounds really strange because you're thinking it's really heavily fat loss orientated, but it's no good losing a lot of body weight if you're losing a lot of muscle. Remember, how you present on stage, how your physique is going to look is going to be determined by how much muscle mass you have and how much fat you manage to lose. And training is a big factor in keeping muscle on your body. So with that in mind, the goal when you first enter prep should be to keep making progress. There's this really weird misconception that as soon as you enter a calorie deficit, your performance goes to and you'll never hit a PR until you go back into your off season. This couldn't be further from the truth. Especially when you first start prep, you'll be tapping into body fat stores to make up for that calorie deficit. That's where we lose body fat from. And you should be carrying very little fatigue, very little diet fatigue. You should still be able to make progress in those first, depending on how aggressive your calorie deficit is, 6 to 8 weeks of prep. And even after that point, every session you should be going in with the thought of hitting a new PR. It might not happen, especially deep into prep, but at that point, a big win would be retaining numbers. If you can retain your strength on big lifts, that's a very good proxy that you're retaining muscle while you're dropping body fat. So that's point number 2 of training on prep. Keep pushing for performance for as long as it's humanly possible. And the third thing we have to consider when it comes to programming and contest prep is that your recovery and work capacity are going to be reduced. So while we do want to stay as strong as possible for as long as possible, we also have to recognize that on a per session basis, because of the amount of fuel you're putting in is reducing, you're not going to be able to do as much per session, or I should say as much quality per session. Whereas on an exercise where you could have done 3 sets, full send, no problem, once you get deep into prep, you're just not going to have the fuel reserves to make that 3rd set really effective. You're just going to end up sandbagging it. It would be better at that point to reassess, chop that set off and just do 2 full send, high quality sets. And the same goes for your recovery because you're putting less calories in. That's less available stuff to go to recovery from sessions that once you were able to recover from in 1 or 2 days, ready to hit that muscle group again, you might still find that recovery a little bit slow and impacting performance in the next sessions. So again, an option is just to reassess, look at how your training is going, look at how your recovery is going, and maybe chop off a set or two per muscle group. Nothing crazy, you don't have to rewrite your program, but just being cognizant of how much your work you're able to do well and how much you're able to recover from will make a world of difference as you get through contest prep. And between those three things, you should have your contest prep training very well structured if you've come out of a really well structured off season.